In this session, we shall exchange views on opportunities and limits of an open parliament. The debate may focus on the tension between an open and friendly visitor center on the one hand and safety requirements on the other hand, and how to strike this balance. This question is obviously of great interest for us, having our parliamentary building under refurbishment at the moment, and of course we are planning under what conditions we can move back to the renovated building. I would just very shortly give you some technical comments on the Austrian situation in view of the current renovation of the historical building and plans for a future visitor center. Above all, Parliament should be open to the citizens, but should also enable people working in the House to work in an orderly and secure manner and to fulfill the needs of the plenary and committee meetings of the National Council and the Federal Council in the best possible way. We have dealt with the question of whether a concept with low threshold access and a later security check in the rear building structures would be feasible. This would have had the advantage of locating facilities for visitors for different target groups in a front part, even before checks on persons would be perceived as a hurdle, and thus to gain more openness for different offers of democracy and education. This was countered by ensuring modern safety standards, not only in terms of the building itself, but also taking into account that this is the workplace of public figures. As a result, it has been shown that the existing historical building structures does not allow this gradation. Due to the accessibility to staircases and the architectural constrictions, which would not allow sufficient control capacity, the positioning of the identity checks immediately upon entry to the building, given the historical architectural conditions, is in fact without a realistic alternative. The visitor center will therefore only be accessible after a security check. At the same time, however, we are considering a thematically coordinated design of the forecourt of the building, for example, based on the model of the currently erected showcases on the Heldenplatz, which you might have seen yesterday, in order to at least gain more low-level presence in promoting democracy for the public. Which might also be of some interest for you is that in planning this balance between openness, friendliness on the one and security on the other hand, we also, of course, try to involve the common public in this planning exercise. And in doing this, we have used this new instrument of crowdsourcing to involve citizens. And we tried to involve citizens not only in legislative processes, but also in issues of substance like the one we are discussing today. So against this background, a pilot project of crowdsourcing was launched on the website of the Parliament on October 26 last year. And in this exercise, we asked citizens the question, what should the newly designed visitor center of our Parliament offer so that as many citizens as possible can and want to get to know their Parliament, its working processes and premises? When the survey was closed on December the 1st, we got 2,030 answers coming from more than 800 people having visited our website, and the answers received led to 6 conclusions. 1, you have to meet the needs of different target groups. 2, you have to make use of modern technologies and interactive methods. 3, the visitor center should be an overall information point for democracy in Austria. 4, the visitor center should be part of public space. 5, the visitor center should be a place where politics and society get together. And finally, 6, that we have been asked to learn from international best practices. And not least to this 6th item, we are very glad that we have the possibility to share our experiences with you today. And I'm, before giving the floor to our 2 colleagues, I would just shortly like to mention that within the last few days, an invitation letter from us has been sent out to all your colleagues being responsible for similar visitor center, inviting for an international conference of visitor centers being held in Vienna in this May. I have asked my team to distribute this information, this invitation letter also to you for your information, and maybe there is an additional interest to join us at this conference, which gives an opportunity to elaborate more on this issue. But now I'm glad to give the floor to our colleague Simone ROOS, as I may say so, newly appointed Secretary General of the Dutch Tweede Kamer, and the well-known Sir David NATZLER, the Secretary General of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, who will be our keynote speakers, and I give you the floor, please.
It is Thursday, 22 March 2018, around 2 in the afternoon. During a session in the plenary hall, one of the visitors jumps from the public gallery. The man has a rope around his neck and is trying to hang himself. This leads to an abrupt end to the debate and the suspension of the session. Members of Parliament, staff, and other visitors are shocked and rush to his assistance. The Speaker of the House of Representatives is one of the first to come to his aid. The man is quickly untied and laid on a nearby table. Shortly after, he is taken away in an ambulance. The House of Representatives is left in shock. In a few seconds, the actions of a single individual transformed the National Assembly Hall, normally the location for public democratic debate, into a theater of horror.
En daarover de volgende motie. De Kamer, constaterende dat vermenging van onderwereld en bovenwereld een bedreiging vormt voor de veiligheid en de rechtsstaat. Overwegende dat het ter voorkoming van vermenging van onderwereld en bovenwereld wenselijk is dat ondernemers in staat worden gesteld om vooraf te laten toetsen door een overheidsinstantie of de persoon.
Snel! Is...
Geschorste vergadering.
De vergadering van de Tweede Kamer is op dit moment geschorst.
Dear colleagues, dear guests, the incident I just described provides a concrete example of the tension between public access and security. I feel honored to be able to discuss such an important theme during my first appearance at this conference. After all, I've only been Secretary General since June 2018. So I would like to thank you for this invitation. The House of Representatives aims to be open and transparent. Because we are a parliament, it's important that the debate is easy to follow for all Dutch people. We achieve this, for example, by means of a live video stream, a free app, and a public gallery for visitors. But this openness also involves risks. Today, I would like to talk about the risks that can influence physical safety and security. People of evil intent can abuse our openness and transparency when making their plans. After all, any disruption will automatically attract attention when it uses the easily accessibly political platform of the House. History shows it's no coincidence that parliaments have sometimes been the target of attacks. The House works based on two core values: openness and security. The challenge that the Dutch Parliament therefore faces every day is how to find a healthy and responsible balance between these two. How can we guarantee safety and security without compromising on openness? And vice versa, how can we continue openness without compromising on safety? Before I continue to explain the Dutch approach, I would like to explain how we put these core values into practice. Let me start with openness. Openness is an essential aspect of Dutch democracy and of our political culture. It's part of a long tradition that we are proud of and that we cherish. The House puts the concept of openness into practice in different ways. Every year, 220,000 people visit our organization. This includes 90,000 pupils who visit The Hague with their classes. The Pro-Demos organization guides these groups for us. Their guides provide information about parliamentary democracy, the building and the political work that takes place in parliaments. All sessions in the plenary hall are open to the press and the public. Almost all committee meetings are also held in public. In addition, on weekdays, the general public can visit the building and the current exhibition. Several times a year, the Parliament building is also open on Saturdays. This happens, for instance, as part of a certain national public holiday or when we organize our own thematic days. Political parties also use the Parliament building for meeting with their members. In this way, we highlight different aspects of Parliament and keep attracting new target groups. All of these initiatives contribute to the House of Representatives' desire to be an open and welcoming Parliament for all Dutch people. 2020 will see the start of a thorough and far-reaching renovation of the inner court, the square around which many Dutch state institutions are located, including the Senate. Following this renovation, the House of Representatives' ambitions for openness will increase even further. The renovation offers opportunities to adapt the buildings in line with these ambitions. This will enable the number of visitors and school students to increase still further. Plans to open the building during weekends are also being considered. All of these developments will only be possible if the House is able to protect its assets effectively. When I use the term assets, I mean politicians, civil servants, and the National Assembly Hall as a symbol of Dutch parliamentary democracy. This brings me to the second core value, the theme of safety and security. In this context, the House of Representatives Security Departments has a key role to play. It ensures that the House's assets are safe and secure. The security of the House involves several standard elements that may be familiar to you. Before visitors can enter the building, there's a security scan using metal security gates. Coats and bags go through a luggage scan, just like at an airport. In addition, the entrances to the Parliament are guarded by the Royal Netherlands Marechaussee, the military police. Throughout the building, there are electronic entry gates to control the flow of visitors and separate it, where necessary, from members and civil servants. This ensures that non-registered visitors always remain in public areas. Staff use their personal passes to open the entry gates and generally spend their time in areas that are close to the public. A network of cameras, both in secured and public areas, enables the security department to observe 24/7 what is going on everywhere. In the Netherlands, we have supplemented this traditional approach with a proactive strategy. In addition to responding to incidents, the organization tries to be one step ahead of potential incidents. Optimal collaboration with partner organizations is extremely important in this. These partners include external parties such as the military police, the security services, and organizations in the healthcare sector. Equally essential is internal cooperation between the departments of security, registry, facilities, and the messenger service. The House, therefore, has a wide and layered network. Collaboration takes place at strategic, tactical, and operational level. An important aspect to this are the short lines of communication between the different levels. The intensive collaboration provides a wealth of information that's increasingly being used for the purposes of proactive security. Some examples. First, by identifying at an early stage a protest that could radicalize, it will be easier to start a conversation to de-escalate matters. Second, a security officer conducting an analysis on social media notices early on that someone has strong feelings about a subject. And third, any session in Parliament on a topic about which emotions run high in the country is analyzed in advance. Additional measures are planned and executed in partnership with the security department, the police and the messenger services. All of these examples illustrate how important collaboration and information are in a proactive security approach. This much is clear. Seen separately, the core values of openness and safety and security are easy to understand. The challenge that the House faces is to find the right balance between these values. We are aware of the risks and apply policy to manage them in order to avoid undermining the openness of the House as much as possible. The Netherlands has opted for a strategy in which Parliament is accessible to visitors, where people can come close to the world of politics. This creates a process that is politically transparent and a sense of closeness and involvement. Proactive security exists in order to prevent as many incidents as possible. An important aspect of finding the right balance is the safety awareness within the organizational culture. Every employee, depending of course on their role, must be aware of the House of Representatives' extraordinary position in this area. Within our organization, safety awareness among parliamentary staff is encouraged by means of joint training courses. Incidents are simulated in the presence of messengers, clerks, security staff, police and politicians. This ensures that staff are aware of potential incidents and know what steps they can take to manage an incident. Let me take you back to the incident I started with. An incident of that kind leads to the need for a new balance between openness and security. Fortunately, the man who jumped from the gallery was not seriously injured, but the incident was of course not without its consequences. Following an investigation and evaluation, the decision was made to introduce visitor registration. This means that visitors will soon need to register in advance. The idea of fitting a glass panel on the gallery was rejected, since this would impact too much on visitors' experience. As part of the renovation of the inner court, plans for a central control room are also being considered. That will have a positive influence on collaboration between the various organizations in the inner court. Let me conclude. We've seen that finding a balance comes down to analyzing the security situation, anticipating new threats and developments, and where necessary, taking concrete action. We do this based on the principle of wishing to cherish the openness and hospitality of our parliament in a way that is safe and responsible. This is an ongoing process. Technology is developing, the world is ever evolving, and incidents will always occur. Therefore, it's essential to not respond reactively when it comes to security, but to opt for a proactive approach that develops in line with the wishes and needs of the organization and society at large. Dear colleagues, I hope that this has given you an impression of the House of Representatives' mission and vision when it comes to openness and security. You may still have some questions or comments. If so, I would be happy to answer them, and thank you for now for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Roos. And Sir David, the floor is yours, please.
It is now. I'm afraid I haven't got any slides or moving pictures, so you'll either just have to listen closely or have a little sleep. I'll also be a little cautious about security details, although happy to answer questions. Like many of you, we are based in Westminster on a busy public highway, which is in fact a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this in itself presents immediate security challenges, quite separate from visitors, in recent weeks involving so far much low-level disorder. On the 22nd of March 2017, exactly 1 year before the horrifying incident which Simone just described, we were subject to a terrorist attack in which an individual armed with knives, having killed with a car 4 people on Westminster Bridge, including a Romanian citizen, ran in past our gates, which were more open than usual because there was a vote in progress, murdered a police officer who was trying to stop him, and was then shot dead by an armed officer. We've just had the inquest. We plainly got the balance wrong between keeping the big iron gates on Parliament Square open as a symbol of not wanting to shut Parliament off from the people, and the safety and security of those working in the Parliament, including the police. And you'll know that in 2013, the Parliament in Ottawa experienced something rather similar. We now have much lighter metal gates that are kept shut and only open specially for vehicles. So that's the context. The other context is that we are in a not far from Westminster Abbey and not very far from Buckingham Palace, and we tend to see ourselves in this central London security arena. Now, we don't have a visitor centre such as the European Parliament has or the US Congress. We've long had that ambition. And I think for all of us, it may be worth thinking For us, the palace itself, the Palace of Westminster, in which both houses sit, is a visitor centre, while still being the place of parliamentary work. And it is that mixture of being a working parliament and a visitor centre that creates many of our difficulties. We are likely, in some years' time, to use the nearby Government Conference Centre, which the House of Lords will be sitting in when we move out in 2026 for 6 or 7 years. When they move back into the palace, that may well become a visitor centre. And that could mean we get many fewer visitors coming to the palace itself, unless they either pay a lot more or come for artistic reasons. And we'd also have a chance for a museum for our artifacts and documents. I suspect it would be a visitor centre for which you wouldn't pay, and much as Harald describes, it would concentrate on democratic politics and not on art and architecture. But I think the idea of a conference in May will certainly be exceedingly welcome in the United Kingdom, as we're right in the middle of trying to work out what a visitor centre should look like. So our visitors, and we have about 15,000 pass holders, but our visitors have to go through what everybody calls airport-style security checks, much as we had here. i.e. what you're carrying, an X-ray, and a pat-down search after an arch, and then you get a little day pass to hang around your necks. We don't seek to get the identity of visitors in advance, i.e. for example, their passport number or their names, and they don't have to give advance notice. There are special queues for those giving evidence to committees or coming as guests as members. And to be candid, we don't really know where they are much of the time. We know they're in public areas, we hope, and we don't really know when they leave. As they go, they hang their little lanyard on a little hook at one of the exits. But if I can put it crudely, more people come in than the number of lanyards we recover. As for the security search, it's an absolute menace because it takes a long time and everybody seems to turn up at the same time, and I will explain why. And it means that queues form, sometimes for over 45 minutes in cold weather. And in cold weather, the queues take longer to process because people have their overcoats, as we experienced this morning, and that takes an extra 15 or 20 seconds per search. We scan, and amazingly, we find every month a lot of material we have to take off visitors, mainly knives, which we don't think they're bringing in because they wish to attack parliamentarians, but because it's a sad part of British culture that particularly younger people carry knives. People also arrive with suitcases and bags, which takes a long time, and we have nowhere to store them. We could devise more or indeed less stringent systems. And I noticed here, for example, we were not checked for liquids. So when people say an airport-style search, I think we have to be a little rigid and say, well, it's not actually an airport-style search. We don't think there's a threat from liquids. I'm sure we'll all be thinking about whether there's a threat from rope. And I'm sure we'll all be thinking, could one of our visitors come into the public gallery carrying rope, for example? I think a pat-down search should have found that, and I hope it would for us. Visitors are a safety risk, but I won't go into that. About a dozen every year fall down and hurt themselves. So we see them on the health and safety report. They get their arms caught in things, they trip over carpets. Our school children get excited when they see an armed policeman, and that makes them walk into lampposts, and so on. So they're a nuisance. We could, of course, have no visitors. We get about 1 million a year. That makes us the 36th visitor attraction in the United Kingdom. The British Museum, which is the biggest, gets 6 million, even more than the Danish National Museum. We're about on a par with Tate Britain and the London Zoo. That's in terms of visitor numbers. But of course, we're also a working parliament for about 225 days a year. The space in the public galleries for about 400 people, and for several hundred more can attend without notice the public meetings of select committees hearing evidence and other committees. All these public meetings are broadcast live on the internet on Parliament TV. So arguably, there is no point in allowing people to come and attend them. If they want to see what's being said and done on the grounds of openness, why do we actually let them in with all the trouble it causes? And our business continuity plans, should we lose one or both chambers, make little or virtually no provision for physical public access. They obviously allow for filming, but not for physical public access. But there is, like in our law courts, a long tradition of having parliamentary proceedings open to the public in a physical way that preceded digital openness as a demonstration of transparency. Virtue signalling, perhaps. The marginal security costs of dealing with public viewing visitors include doorkeepers who also act as stewards, and the cost of erecting the toughened glass screen, which we do have in front of the main public gallery in the Commons, erected in 2005. That was intended to stop people throwing things. Purple powder had been thrown from a side gallery and managed to hit the then Prime Minister, Mr. Blair. Fortunately, it wasn't anthrax, but it's not a risk we felt we could take any longer. So we no longer have a police officer sitting in the room for committee proceedings as we used to. There's a patrolling team of officers instead. Slightly bad things happen in our committees, as I guess in yours, but nothing serious since a so-called comedian pushed a plate full of shaving foam into the face of Rupert Murdoch in 2011, which we all regret. The public also expect to be able to come to Parliament to talk to their member, either by invitation or at their own request. And there is an understood right of public access to the central lobby right in the middle of the building, where you can hand in a little card, which is then they try to find the member to come and see you. Less antique are the number of people with appointments to meet members and their staff in their offices or in the various areas we have informal meetings. There's also been, which maybe some of you don't have, a huge growth in groups, all-party parliamentary groups, so-called, and special interest groups, who hold publicly advertised meetings on various subjects in the various meeting rooms around the estate to hear from speakers and share experiences. On a busy day, these attract hundreds of visitors, and they do raise security concerns, as well as the burden they put on the screening system on subjects like Kashmir or Palestine or narcotics. There often has to be a police presence in case other groups have different views. So it's a valued part of our open democratic society, but it's also, they come to us because we don't charge a higher fee for the rooms. So if you wish to hold a public meeting, it's a very attractive place to hold it. We also have tours of the palace, as I guess many of you I know have tours. One of them is called democratic access, which is a euphemism for the fact that it's sponsored by an MP or a peer. We get about 60,000 visitors on democratic access, which means the taxpayer pays and not the individual. And paying entry, which costs about £25. So if any of you come to Westminster, you'll be very welcome if you've got the money in your pocket. And we get about 185,000 paying visitors a year, and both are guided by our own paid staff. There's also a self-guiding £20 audio tour, which you hear me briefly, and lots of other people, which is very good, and I recommend those who don't have it. And it means the palace, when the hundreds of people are going around, is remarkably silent, because they're all listening, as you are now, on your headphones. So I assume that's why you're all silent. We have school parties. Did you say 90,000, Simone? I'm most impressed. We aim to get 100,000, but pro rata, that is a lot less. We have a special education centre, which has just got some classrooms, including an immersive experience, and an eating area where they can eat their packed lunches, and toilets designed for smaller children. That has its own search point. We have safeguarding procedures, and safeguarding is for us a newish concern in the last few years, not just for children, but for vulnerable adults, for which, again, we are responsible if and when something goes wrong. It means that not all pass holders can get into the education centre, and it specifically excludes elected members who often come to the centre to see the children from their constituency and are furious on being told that their past isn't going to operate on the door and say, how can you imagine that we're not safe around children? It is cheaper and easier, much cheaper and relatively much easier to send people out to schools rather than having school children come to us. The schools have to pay most of the costs of a bus or 2 buses to bring them down. They get up at an ungodly hour in the morning to come down, so they're exhausted much of the time they're in Westminster. They visibly enjoy it, but it's questionable if it's the most sensible use of resources. We also, which I don't think many other parliaments do have, run a thriving and profitable banqueting business. Both houses, mainly the Commons, which brings income from private dining rooms and large catered events. There is a distant parliamentary connection in most cases, but it's pretty distant. We provide stewards in the evenings to make sure people don't wander away from the receptions into forbidden areas. We also offer, as I know many of you do, meals to the public in our dining rooms on some occasions. We're aware that about half of our paying visitor population are non-UK. In other words, they're foreign visitors, and we offer foreign language tours in many but not all of the languages I see. And we do ask, does that matter? Should we advantage UK visitors in some way in seeing their parliament? Why should we have to be spending money, in some cases, so that overseas tourists can have an amusing time in our parliament? So we're so used to having visitors, in conclusion, that we hardly ever stop and ask, what are the security costs and implications? We've got masses of staff who are there because we have visitors, including security staff. And the prospect of moving out in 6 or 7 years is making us ask, how will we deal with visitors then, when there's nothing to visit? And what will we do when we come back? Some members think we have the balance wrong, and that visitors of all sorts get under their feet and are a nuisance in a working legislature. But they strongly don't feel that when it's their constituents who are in question. So I want to just end with mentioning what Simone mentioned, oddly enough, not by planning, which is Saturday opening. It was very unpopular for some staff when it was first proposed because it means weekend rostered working for many staff. It exhausts the building and it reduces the opportunity for maintenance at weekends. But we thought, if we are to be a visitor attraction, how can we be shut at a weekend, which is the one time that many of our own citizens are at leisure to be able to visit the Parliament, as opposed to overseas visitors? So we got on with it, and it's now a natural part of our life. And we have at weekends weddings in the palace, and baptisms, probably divorces. So it's one test that you might apply, or you ought to, is if your Parliament is not open to visitors all or most of the weekends when your citizens might be able to come, why not? Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of our keynote speakers. We can now move on to the discussion. I have 5 requests for the floor on my list. The first would be Maija-Leena Pavola from Finland. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the most interesting presentations we just heard. Few remarks about the situation in Finland and Finnish Parliament. Actually, we haven't had any violent incidents inside or outside our Parliament premises, as far as I remember. Our main Parliament building reopened in 2017, a year and a half years ago, after 2 years renovation. It was the last part of the renovation program, which started in 2008 and covered all other parliamentary premises except our newest annex building, which was built in 2004. The main house had been restored to its original splendor and received much publicity. Interests in our Parliament House grew. The number of visitors, which over the years had averaged 30,000 annually, was about 60,000 from September to December 2017. At the same time, we have had to limit access to the Eduskunta complex for security reasons. To get in, you need to have an appointment to meet someone or attend something, or you can join a tour group. Bookings for next May, when most school classes visit, are almost full. Our visitor center is still open for walk-in visitors, but will soon have a security gate. On the positive side, we are still able to make room for everyone who wants to watch a plenary session from the public gallery. The only requirement is that you are sober and walk through the metal detector. Also, after the renovation, we are fully accessible for all visitors, irrespective of physical constraints. If demand continues to grow, we will need to increase our capacity to receive visitors. No plans are now in the works, but I would not be surprised if maybe after 2023 someone proposes building a new, larger visitor center. And I would like to thank Mr. Chair for invitation to your conference here in Vienna this May, and maybe I will send someone to listen what kind of ideas you have there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. The next on the list is Mr. Claes Martensson from Sweden, please.
Thank you, Mr. DOSSI. Every year, thousands of people visit the Riksdag in Sweden. The Riksdag is open for visitors who want to follow debates, public hearings, guided tours, and study visits. At the Riksdag, physical and information security measures are always balanced against the Parliament's obligation to uphold openness towards the public and the media. Our ambition is for the visitors to feel welcome and that the Riksdag is perceived as an open Parliament. The balance of security measures and an open Parliament is a complex process that takes into account the risks associated with physical safety of all functions and people in the Riksdag and the threats against information security. Our security measures, including the checks at the main entrance points, are part of the administration's work in ensuring openness and the undisrupted continuity of the parliamentary process. We consider openness as the right to obtain insight into the parliamentary process rather than as an open doors policy. The security measures undertaken are therefore means to prevent disturbances which cause disruptions to the parliamentary process and undermine openness for all. Last year, close to 72,000 people visited the Riksdag. Last year, another 40,000 guests took part in events organized by administration, members of the parliament, and political party groups. Sessions of the chamber held in the plenary are open to the public and the media. Visitors can view the sessions of the chamber from within the gallery of the plenary. As a rule, committee meetings are not open to the public, but exceptions can be made for hearings. However, consultations of the Committee on European Affairs with the government ahead of the European Council are open to the public. Tours of the Riksdag building for the general public and student groups are held daily by our guides in Swedish and English. The challenge here is to make sure that the entrance points are open in time to allow large numbers of visitors to be cleared for entry. Our security team makes sure that the doors are open in due time before an open meeting. At the moment, we have no specific center designated for visitors. The administration will look into this in the future. However, pre-booked groups of school children and students can participate in a model parliament session held in a democracy workshop area. For the media, access to the work of the Riksdag extends beyond that of the visitors. Accredited journalists can also access some of the communal areas. To make sure that security measures are appropriate and do not infringe on our ambitions for visitors to feel welcome and to uphold an open parliament, the administration carries out regular visitors' experience surveys to make sure that our security measures do not limit openness. To date, these surveys have shown a high degree of visitors' approval. Thank you, Mr. DOSSI.
Thanks a lot. The next one is Mr. Socrates.
I would firstly like to thank the Secretary General of the Austrian Parliament for the organization and the warm hospitality extended to us. There are two interconnected ways of contemplating openness of parliaments. The first involves the circulation of information and the subsequent transparency this involves with regard to the workings of parliaments. The second way concerns the issue of parliamentary security in relation to openness to the public. Due to the various threats to security, some parliaments have enhanced their security measures, covering issues such as security personnel and equipment, governance, financing and training, and have introduced measures for safeguarding the security of parliament buildings. These issues will be taken into account in the functioning of the new parliament building in Cyprus, whose construction will begin this year. However, our strive for parliamentary security should not compromise our efforts for openness and transparency towards the public, as citizen trust in democratic institutions is related to the transparency of parliamentary business. Moreover, enhanced security measures should not under any circumstances lead to misuse or abuse of personal data. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, dear colleague. And the next one on the list, Horst Rissev from the German Bundestag, please.
German.
Well, first of all, I would also like to thank the Austrian hosts for organizing this successful conference. As far as our topic this morning is concerned, let me thank our two keynote speakers for their introduction into this topic. The contributions which have been made so far have shown that we are all finding ourselves in the field in which we have to balance openness against security. And at the Bundestag, we are trying to ensure the safety of our members of parliaments by offering the services of a special police service comprising 230 officers, the so-called Bundestagspolizei, the police forces of the Bundestag. In addition, the state police of the state of Berlin is ensuring the safety around the parliament buildings. And this includes the first aspect of our safety concept, which focuses on a consistent protection of the external part of the parliamentary buildings. No one should enter the building who does not have or has not been granted access to the members of parliament, members of the administration, including, of course, authorized visitors, and I will touch upon visitors later on. The second element is a stringent access control, and the third element includes patrolling by the Bundestag police force. Within the Bundestag building, we have an area of 500,000 square meters, which is quite a lot to cover in our security plan. The plenary meetings of the Bundestag are public, and so this means that we have around 50,000 visitors in the visitors' galleries in the Reichstag building, which come to witness the sessions every year. In addition to that, we have a large number of visitors who also come for presentations, also on the sidelines of meetings, roughly 500,000 people every year. And in addition to that, there are, of course, the various types of guided tours in the building as such, architectural tours which also include the art which is being exhibited and the art collections which we have in the buildings, and also historical tours about the history of the parliament. The offer also includes guided tours for children, which are offered on the various days of the week, including weekends, by the way. And so we have, on top of all the visitors who come to visit our houses of parliament, also roughly 1.1 to 1.3 million visitors who just come to visit the dome of the building in order to enjoy the excellent view you have of the city of Berlin from up there. And so overall, we have roughly 2.1 to 2.3 million visitors every year. And if you compare this to the parliaments all over the world, we are probably one of the parliamentary buildings which accepts the highest number of visitors. Now, how is access to the Reichstag building ensured? Of course, since there have been various videos in terrorist environments which displayed the building as a terrorist target, we have increased our security measures. You have to get a reservation, have to give your first name and last name and date of birth. So that's quite a simple set of information, which, however, is sufficient to find criminals or persons which have been linked to terrorist activities. And when you want to enter the building, of course, you have to bring your ID, and your identity is checked against the information provided with the application, which has to be sent in advance. Every visitor, in addition, has to pass our security gates, which are quite similar to what you have here in this building. And as NATZLER said, we also have something which is not quite equivalent to airport-style checks. So we wouldn't check for liquids, and also things such as ropes would probably not be detected. We'll have to see whether this standard is sufficient for the future as well. It's something we'll have to keep an eye on. And in addition to checking the identity of people who want to access the building, we also have baggage controls similar to what you have in this building here. These checks have turned out to be successful in that we have so far not been the victim of a terrorist attack, and we have also not yet have any such terrible events as have, or you have witnessed in the Dutch Parliament. That being said, it's also true that we find weapons such as knives on a weekly basis. So all kinds of objects that the people will bring with them, and they expect to be able to enter the building even if they carry a knife. Obviously, that is not the case. But of course, the feeling of having the perfect type of check is certainly something we have not yet achieved. And then bearing in mind that we have more than 2 million visitors, the question is also how long a queue will you have to accept? Because improving the security standards usually leads to a longer check, which will then increase the length of the queue. And the queue as such can then again be the target of a terrorist attack. So up until 2011, we had the X-ray gates installed within the Reichstag building. The Federal Criminal Office and our own internal police force then took the decision that this cannot be continued also with regard to the terrorist threat, and so container buildings have been set up in front of the building in order to house these security checks, including for visitors who would just like to see the dome. Of course, the containers are only a provisional solution, and so we also have the plan to build a visitors center. However, this is something which is quite difficult, bearing in mind the surroundings, which do not offer the necessary space to erect such a building. And the solution has now been found, which, however, can only work if we succeed in establishing or in building a link to the Reichstag building, which will allow visitors to have direct access to the building and therefore avoid queuing up to enter the building again, because that would be absurd. The visitor center will then also open up new possibilities for those visitors who would just like to see the dome, to get a short introduction into the history and function of this rooftop area which they would like to see. We will not only have presentation areas, but also a short video room or cinema with short films, and other information will be displayed there. But as I said, we have only started planning the visitor center, and I do hope that we will be able to bring this project to a good end in the near future, because the situation as we have it now with the container is a situation which is not sustainable. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much, Horst. And the next one on my list is Albino Acevedo Soares from Portugal.
Thank you, Secretary General. Dear colleagues, the Portuguese Parliament is located since 1834 in a former 16th monastery named the Palácio de São Bento. It's an open parliament for education and cultural visits, for following political work, for citizenship initiatives, and for combined purposes. Plenary sessions can be attended by a maximum of 600 people, with guards responsible for maintaining the order in the galleries. I can tell you that daily there are about 70 police officers responsible for the security of the Parliament. No volumes or personal objects are allowed in the galleries, and similar rules apply to committees meetings attendance. Cultural visits for scheduled groups include the most emblematic space of the Parliament. On plenary days, the access to the session hall is not possible 1 hour before the beginning of the session for security reasons, preventive search for explosives and security sealing. There are also guided tours to the Parliament building on last Saturday of each month, as well on the 25th April, date of the Carnation Revolution in 1974, and on the European Heritage Days at the end of September. We also sponsor different internal events or in partnership with civil society, such as book launches, theater plays, concerts or seminars, which require the occupation of some space in the Parliament. Another way of opening Parliament to the community is through the Youth Parliament program, which, given 24 years of existence, remains one of the most important citizenship education projects. The number of registered schools continue to grow annually, and consequently, the number of students aged 10 to 18 who engage in school election campaigns, representing their interests and those of their peers in regional and national debates. In the edition for 2019, the number of competing schools is about 1,000, the highest reached in these 24 years. Last but not least, we also use communication for parliamentary openness, namely the parliamentary television channel, the new website, and social networks, Facebook and Instagram. Our communication strategy will be expanded in 2019 with new institutional accounts on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. In short, the Portuguese Parliament is an open parliament. Security challenges cannot be denied, but they cannot hinder us from pursuing an open-door politics as a way of welcoming citizens to the house of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least on my list, Mrs. Agnieszka Kasmarska from Poland, please.
Szanowny Pani Przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. I would also like to thank my predecessors for what they said. It was very interesting. All the speeches were very interesting. I would also like to share with you some comments as regards the experience of the Polish Parliament. The idea of an open parliament is extremely important for the proper functioning of the Republic of Poland, the most important body of state authorities in the parliamentary democracy system. This idea has been implemented in the same on many levels. We provide free access to information about our work by broadcasting live plenary sessions and committee sittings. Moreover, these broadcasts are archived and available online once the parliamentary work is over. The evolution of technology and an increasing access to it reduce the importance of following the same sessions as they take place. Nevertheless, Polish citizens have access to a special gallery, public gallery, where they can watch directly plenary sessions of the Parliament. The idea of openness is also materializing while granting access to information. The Polish Sejm has an extensive website documenting in detail the legislative process as well as the course of sessions. the Chancellery of the Sejm also replies to requests of access to public information. The Sejm is also implementing the idea of openness in the area of the legislative process. It means that the Sejm is ready to work on legislation and referendum requests submitted by the citizens. It is worth adding that for more than 3 years, the Sejm has been receiving and examining petitions which, when approved, often lead to the launch of specific legislative works. The Polish Sejm is an open space, in the strict meaning of the word open. The buildings are physically available and open to big groups of visitors, despite its historic interiors, and even though they are not adapted to visiting and conducting of parliamentary works at the same time. Making the headquarters of the Sejm available to citizens is extremely important for maintaining the idea of citizen involvement. The possibility to see the parliamentary buildings inspires the citizens to feel shared responsibility for the state, and at the same time it reduces the feeling of being excluded and omitted during the lawmaking process. This way we diminish the barrier between the state and the citizens. We are cyclically open to all interested parties within the open days. Since the contemporary world is not free from serious and real threats, therefore the openness of each parliament, also of the Sejm, has its limitations. The openness of the Sejm and availability of its information comply with security requirements. We pay special attention to the security of computer networks and the resilience of databases to external interference. Security-related aspects are also important as regards counteracting and eliminating of physical threats. Thus, full openness has to be limited in order to allow this key state institution to function and to guarantee the safety of all persons present within the same complex. Security and order is guaranteed by our security guards. Since May last year, these guards became a special service to the state. The security service cooperates, or the same security service cooperates with other security agencies of the state. The control of security check of the people accessing the Sejm and public gallery is conducted just like in the cases previously presented by other colleagues. We also have a visitors center that has a special name. Last year, this visitors center had more than 130,000 visitors. At the end, I would like to add that I would like to thank you for inviting us to your May conference. Polish representatives will participate in this event. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and I would now like to pass the floor back to our two keynote speakers for eventual remarks and answers. Please. You decide who is going to start?
We've decided. She decided. Just to say that I've learned a lot. I'm sure we all have. I've learned that in Finland, visitors have to be sober. I don't know how difficult that is. That over 1 million people visit the cupola on the Reichstag building, which is amazing thought. And that in Lisbon they allow, or you allow, theatrical productions, which is something which is still controversial in Westminster, where some people feel you shouldn't allow theatre, although it's been going on there for about 700 years. And I didn't know that. I'm ashamed as a Commonwealth Clark not to know that Cyprus was having a new parliament building. So that's great news. I think Agnieszka was absolutely right to bring in cybersecurity, which I guess neither of us mentioned, and that the risks of being ever more on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and so on have to be balanced. God knows some of us have suffered cyber attacks, including from state actors, as they're politely described. And that is the biggest threat to our security from a sort of virtual visitor, I guess. So it is, cybersecurity is connected. And finally, just to say, I thought Kleis had it right, that it is, openness means insight, ability to be told what's happening in the fullest possible detail and to have things explained, and not of necessity unlimited physical access. So it's the intellectual access and not the physical access that we should be thinking about if we're trying to be open.
Maybe something in addition. I learned a lot also, of course. It's very interesting to learn from each other. And I think that's one of the functions of this network. My conclusion, we all have the opinion it's very important to find a good balance between openness and security. And I think sometimes that's difficult to do the right thing. Both are very important, and I'm convinced that this is a ongoing process. We have to be very sharp on this issue, I think. In our country, I was surprised. I didn't work there at the moment of the crisis, 22 of March. I was a GG at a ministry and not a SG of the parliament, the House of Representatives. So it's very easy to have comment if you are not working there. But when I started in the new job, I was surprised that we didn't register the visitors before, because I think it's good to start up with it now. Never raised a good crisis. Because it's important, I think, that we know who is inside the building, also with fire, for example. For me, the own police force, our colleague of the Bondsdag told me, and we talked about it yesterday evening also, is very interesting. And maybe it's a good idea in the Netherlands for after the renovation. We go back to the Binnenhof, that's the name of our inner court, our square, with all those institutions around it. We go back in 2025, that's the planning. I hope it's realistic. But maybe after renovation we can cooperate with all those institutions and go for a shared service, security shared service, maybe with police force for ourselves, because now we don't have that. So thank you very much for your comment, and well, I will take all those information back to the Netherlands. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you once again to our distinguished speakers, to all of you. For me personally, it has been very interesting listening to this discussion, that I have the impression that most of the contributions by you have been very much focused on the safety issue of our parliamentary building, which maybe is not surprising due to the current state of affairs of threats we are all having. But on the other hand, I think it's interesting that at least as far as I have the impression that on the other side, we are under constant challenge by our political masters with their wishes and visions to be still more open, still more friendly. And I think for all of us it will be an ongoing challenge to strike the right balance between those desirables. And having said that, I think all in all it has been a very fruitful and substantial discussion. Thank you once again, and particularly for our two keynote speakers. Thanks a lot. Dear colleagues, we are now coming to the final phase of this conference. The only agenda item still open is the item any other business. Before asking you whether one of you have concerns, information he or she would like to share with us, I have been asked during the coffee break by our British colleague, Sir David NATZLER, to give him a few moments. Sir David, please.
Thank you, and I apologize for hogging the microphone. As you will all know very well, the United Kingdom is due to leave the European Union on the 29th of March this year, 61 days. So that if and when that happens, we'll no longer be attending meetings such as these as members, although we hope to have members at your March CFSP conference in Romania. On behalf of my colleagues and of many others over half a century almost who have preceded us here, I want to thank you and your colleagues for your staunch support and friendship over that period. For many of us, certainly for all of us here, the EU has been an integral part of our working and personal lives. So we say rather frequently that the UK is due to leave the EU, but we're not leaving Europe. We remain Europeans, and many EU citizens in the UK will be voting in the EP elections. And on a personal note, that in Vienna, of all places, that is true, that we cannot but help be Europeans. My father was born here in 1917, in the last years of the First World War. So for me, Vienna is also a very good place to say goodbye as I retire in a month's time after 43 years, short years in the parliamentary service, having started as a clerk in our European Union Committee in 1975 when the European Union was very young. And to thank you all as colleagues and friends, and to thank you, Harald, for your wonderful hospitality, for providing sunshine and snow, Burgenland Sekt, and the Radetzky March. And my best wishes to you all.
Thank you very much, Sir David. What remains to say is that there is still an ongoing discussion, I take it, within Great Britain, in any case between Great Britain and the rest of the European Union. And I think everything we can wish to all of us is that in the end it will be an intelligent and wise decision taken. There still remain hope, I I think. But in any case, thank you very much, and for your personal future after your retirement, in all our name, all the best. Thank you very much. Under any other business, is there any other wish to take the floor? If not, then I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all our keynote speakers, to all of you, to all delegates for your constructive contributions and debates during this meeting. The minutes of the conference will be sent to you in the forthcoming weeks. The photos will be made available as soon as possible on our web page, www.eu 2018 parl.at, which you might know from the time of our presidency. And we will also email you the family photo as a little memento for this conference. So once again, I would like to thank you all for attending the conference and for your active participation.